Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Drew Davis, and I want to welcome you to Learn How to See Better. It's the only podcast out there that'll actually improve your vision the longer you listen. I want to take a moment to thank you for joining me today, and I've got some great information lined up for you. So relax and tune in, because we're about to begin. Good morning, everyone. How's it going? This is Drew, and I'm dropping a new episode here today, and it's a Saturday morning, and I'm headed to school on a Saturday. Oh, you know what that's like, right? For all my grown-ups out there tuned in. You remember school on Saturday? School on Saturday, the penalty box that we would have to go into, and I'll get to why I'm going to school here on a Saturday in just a second, because I'm looking forward to going to school on a Saturday, getting to learn some exciting things that are pretty forward thinking and next level. But as I sit here headed towards school on a Saturday, it makes me think back to the first time I had school on a Saturday, you know, coming up in like high school, when, you know, it all started. You'd mess around and be late for class, right? You're running your mouth, you're gabbing with your friends, you know, after lunch or nutrition break, and you end up, you know, after the bell. And it was always that one teacher, right, that would that was a stickler. You know, if you were a second late after that bell, they're writing you up. You know, you're tardy, you got detention. It's like, and you know, back in my day, I was generally playing some kind of sport in at any of those times that you're late for class, right? So it's like, you give me detention now. If I go to detention, I'm late for practice more often than not. And if I'm late for practice, coach is gonna let me have it, right? I'm gonna be doing extra laps, push-ups, sit-ups, sprints, gassers, you name it. And so, you know, for me, it's kind of like you had that decision point, right? You know you're busted, you know you're in trouble, but do you go ahead and eat that detention and, you know, deal with it with the coach a little bit later, or, you know, do you go ahead and serve your time and get it over with? And I remember, you know, having to go to school on a Saturday once. It was like, I'm not running that extra, you know, 2 miles or whatever it was going to be. I'll just have to do school on a Saturday. Since we didn't always have practice on Saturdays, that was kind of like, all right, I guess this is my trade-off. And I remember the worst thing about the school on Saturday was not only Saturday's your time you sleep in, and I don't even care if you're in high school. It's like you probably wanted to do something laying around watching some kind of show. It might even still be a cartoon, you know, eating your Fruit Loops, you know, hanging out on the couch or whatever. Or maybe if it's summertime, you know, you're hitting the pool with some friends or going to the movies, whatever, right? And I remember just thinking, gosh, I don't want to have to get up early. You know, you still have to get up early, even though it's a Saturday, because you're basically going to detention. And they never had anything for you to do at school on Saturday. It was like you either got to stare at the chalkboard and let time pass. No Game Boys, no writing notes, no messing around. There's no social media back then that you could just, you know, post your updates right there from school on Saturday. But yeah, you either had some busy homework assignment to do, or you could do homework, or just kind of stare at the chalkboard, just sit there and let the time pass. No fun, right? And you get out, you know, midday, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm finally freed from the purgatory of school on Saturday. Now I can get on with, you know, doing whatever. And it's funny to think how, you know, times have changed so much, because, you know, now as a grown adult, it's like, I'm going to school on a Saturday. Well, what's up with that? And just thinking of how I've learned how to see better. And, you know, even if you had some assignment or some basic lesson they would teach you, it's like, oh, I have to learn. I have to go through this process. And now I see it so completely different, literally the opposite. You know, nowadays I get to attend and get access to information and education that I take action on that benefits me and those around me. So it's kind of crazy to think how, you know, in just, you know, a little chunk of time, so to speak, from, you know, being a kid looking at school on Saturday as the ultimate punishment, to now seeing that it is the nights and the weekends that you can leverage if you've got the free time to give yourself a little extra edge in whatever it is you're trying to do, right? You know, if you're trying to climb the ranks of your job, you could be taking some extra educational module or getting some extra certification. You know, some people choose to get their master's. That's one way to go about it, right? You know, if you're an entrepreneur, you could be, you know, finding your favorite educator and gobbling up a playlist of some of their best videos, or doing some research on something that you're more interested in. Just taking action to be proactive about learning, because learning and developing skills are what give us opportunities to master a craft. And when we're able to master a craft, that can really be a provider for us, providing skill. Way back in the day, you'd have like a blacksmith, somebody would make shoes or forge steel. That was a skill, and they were able to live off that, to eat that way, right? So when we look at the standpoint of continually educating ourselves, is so important, because what I've seen is that from a society standpoint, it's like we're all put on kind of the same set of railroad tracks, right? Educationally, and what happens is you kind of get to the end of high school, and it's like the train tracks end unless you elect to get on another set of train tracks for higher education. And whether you go to college or not, this isn't even about that or the educational system, but the point is, for most of our lives, we have a structure in place set up to kind of spoon feed us education. Like, hey, you've got to learn this, right? But once you get to the point where you're an adult, you can elect to opt out of education, which is amazing in that if you actually think about the number of people that essentially, through action, not by maybe conscious thought, basically opt out of education for the rest of their lives, right? If you stop learning at 20 years old, think about that, and you're running around at 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old with the skill set of a 20-year-old, what logical part of the equation, becomes, jumps out at you and says that with an education of a 20-year-old, as a 40 and 50 and 60-year-old, I'm going to be equipped with the necessary education to achieve my wildest dreams, to achieve the ability and the know-how to create the life of my dreams. It's almost so naive, it's preposterous. and I'm saying that, tongue in cheek, but I think that if you were to go and ask, 10 people, casually in conversation, hey, what's the last book you read? And what was the last book you read, and when was the last time you read a book? Like cover to cover. Not picked up and tried to read a book, but read a book cover to cover that was not like leisure. It's great to be able to read for leisure, but the question's based in education. What was the last book you read to learn something? Cover to cover. What was it? When was it? There's nicer ways to ask that aren't so direct, but I'm trying to be direct in my explanation of how someone could be approached simply. And I've been in conversations where the response has been, I haven't read a book since high school. And it's a conversation I've had with people when I was 30 plus. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, for someone my age to say I haven't read a book since high school. And granted, I didn't have the longest list, but by the time this conversation had come up, I actually had read quite a few books, in the months leading up to that conversation. And so it's like, whether you're going to school on a Saturday or whether you're going to night school, I think that one of the keys to success, it's not about necessarily, being in, like if you're in a master's program or something like that, but the idea of a philosophy of educating yourself continually and continually wanting to know more and taking charge and taking control of what you learn and what you put in your head versus what's fed to you is one of the most basic ways I think that you can live with definiteness when it comes to the bigger picture of how you manage your life, managing your inputs, managing the information that comes into your world. You've maybe heard the saying, garbage in, garbage out, right? Well, if you feed yourself nothing but head trash, how do you expect to have anything else in your head but trash? But no different than planting seeds and breeding new life. When you're growing a tree, as an example, good nutrients and good soil, right? You give what you want to grow all the key things that it needs, and that's how you'll be best positioned for success. And the same thing goes with our own mental inputs. And to not recognize that even over the course of our lifetime, you might be not so hip to it, for a decade after you get out of school. Okay, great. But once you know what do you do with what you know? Because awareness is the first step towards change. But if you become aware of something and don't make the change, and it's like, it's no different than the saying where, how's the saying go? It's essentially that there's no difference between the person who knows how to read and doesn't than a person who doesn't know how to read. It's like, what do you mean? If I know how to read, I can read if I want to or not. That's not the point. If you choose to not read, that's your prerogative. But if you know how and choose not to, there's essentially no difference between you and the person who doesn't know how to, because the end result's the same. There's never the input that comes from the ability. So it's just one different way of looking at things, where if you start to think about how we go about spending our time and making the conscious choice to invest in ourselves, invest in our time. I'm not even talking about the capital standpoint of it. Capital investments you make on yourself and your education, or outside the formal school system, are a whole different discussion in and of themselves, which would probably be great for a separate or future episode, right? But the idea of a school on a Saturday, if the idea is super foreign to you, it's probably fair to say that it's good that you're getting introduced to the concept now, because I'll be the first to tell you from personal experience that the idea and the concept of being willing to quote unquote sacrifice some of your free time in order to invest in your own knowledge, know-how, and abilities is super significant, and will be a huge fallacy and thought to overlook. And I would encourage you all to consider looking at how you spend some of that fair time, and if you couldn't carve off a little bit of your time and budget out of your leisure time for investment in your own future, because you know what, you'll always have a little bit more, you'll always make some more leisure time, but the skill that you never learn or get exposed to when you have the opportunity to is also the one that will never serve you when the opportunity arises. So that's something to think about and noodle on this weekend. And if you're enjoying some leisure time, I hope you do continue to enjoy it. This isn't a fun spoiler, but consider still even being able to break off a piece of that for mental growth and stimulation, even if it's as simple as being in the form of reflection on what's taken place in your life the last 7 days. That'll help you get a better understanding how you've been using your time, and maybe then the awareness comes in that if you had some soft spots and a lot of wasted time and more leisure time than you think you needed to really get the rest and recovery that you need, then consider that as some of what might be a great point to start with, and say, if I could give up just a little bit of that might not hurt so bad to be able to make that investment in myself and be what I need to flick that big domino and get things moving in the right direction. So with that, I'm wrapping this one up, you guys. Thanks for joining. Please do share, subscribe, like, give it to a friend, give it away now. And would love to get your support and continue to tune in on future episodes. We'll keep this theme about education going as I'll walk you through other ways that I've learned how to see better. So thanks again for joining. Talk to y'all soon.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.